Hello, my name's JC, and today we're going to talk about Skilsaw Safety. So, as you can see, we have a couple of different skill saws here, but before I get into that, I want to talk about the clothing that you need to be wearing. You need to be wearing no loose clothing or dangly jewelry. So if you're wearing a hoodie with like the strings hanging down, make sure you either tie those up or tuck them in. Also, as you can see, I have my hard hat on. I'm going to be wearing some safety glasses. And before I make my cut, I'm going to put in some earplugs, but for now, I'm just going to leave them out so that I can talk to you and not yell. Also, I have good work boots, jeans, and a sort of a denim shirt on. So, before you ever use a skill saw, you have to know which one to choose. There's two different types. If you can see, this one in my right hand is called a sidewinder, or a direct drive. The one in my left hand, which is much more commonly used, is called a worm drive. That's the one that we're going to be using today, but I wanted to give you an idea of what a direct drive looks like. I'm going to set this one aside. And we'll talk about the worm drive. So the first thing you want to do when you get a skill saw before you use it is check it for safety, damage, and defects. So I'm going to rub my hands along the cord to make sure there's no nicks or cuts. This one's a little bit nicked up, but it's not through, there's no wires exposed, okay? So I'm going to keep going. The rest of it seems pretty good. I also want to check to make sure that all the adjustment bars are working properly. Make sure that the guard doesn't stick. I'm going to look at it, look at the bolt. Oh, here's a defect. This bolt right here is missing a nut on this side. What happens is, when that nut comes off, this bolt comes undone, and then that's kind of what's holding the whole thing together. But also, you can't get it to go over all the way to a 45. So let's not use that saw. I'm going to set this one aside. And I have another one right here. Cord's good. Adjustment bars are working. The nut is there. The oil plug is in. The guard doesn't stick. Another thing I'm going to check to make sure before I use this saw, because I haven't used it before and somebody else was probably using it yesterday, I don't know how tight they tightened this bolt that holds the blade on. It's important that you don't over tighten it because it says right on the wrench, warning, to protect against kickback, tighten blade bolt 1/8 turn past finger tight. So, as you can see, the teeth go that direction, which means the blade spins this direction, which means the bolt tightens the opposite direction. Most things in life are lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, but on this particular case, it's going to be the opposite. So I'm going to push the bolt, the locking button in, and put the wrench on the arbor until it locks. And now it's locked into position. And now I can loosen the bolt. Now that I've gotten it loose, I'm going to go finger tight while still holding the button. That's finger tight. And then I'm just going to go 1/8 of a turn past, which is just about 2 inches. That's tight enough. The reason that we do that is because there's a built-in clutch in the motor of this guy. So if it does bind up on us, it's not going to kick back. Kickback is very dangerous. This saw is pretty new, so it's a little bit tight. All right, well, let's see about making a cut. I'm just going to make a cut into this 2x4. I want to make sure that my material that I'm going to cut off is hanging over the edge and not in between the two supports. If you can see, there's two sawhorses here. I don't want to cut in the middle because that causes things to bind, and then you get, again, that kickback. It's dangerous. Always want to make sure you secure the material that you're going to be cutting. So I'm just going to clamp it right to this piece of plywood here in a couple of spots. Now, before I go to make my cut, I want to make sure that my bevel gauge is set at 0 degrees because I want a square cut. And I want to make sure that my depth is good. Now you can set the depth easily by pulling it up all the way and setting the saw blade right next to your material while pulling the guard back. Now if I drop that saw right down to the material below the material I want to cut, that's going to be exactly the right thickness that I want. Then as I tighten up this locking lever, it's going to pull it down just a little bit more, which makes it exactly the depth that I want. This one has a hook for me to hang it on, and I've got a nail in this sawhorse. So I'm going to hang it on there, and then I'm going to plug my saw in. Now before I make my cut, I want to get my safety gear on, right? 85 decibels and above is when hearing loss happens. And I know that that's louder than 85, so I'm going to put my handy dandy little pink earplugs in here. And I'll try not to yell. Notice that this saw has 2 handles. If your hands are on both handles, you cannot cut your hand. So one hand operates the trigger and one hand drives. I'm going to use my left hand to operate the trigger. Before I make the cut, I want to make sure that the blade is not touching the material to be cut. Because watch what happens when I pull the trigger. See how it jerks like that? It's going to do that every time. So I want to let it and then get it adjusted to where I want to make my cut. So I'm going to line it up, pull the trigger, 2 hands on the saw. Now before I move, I'm going to wait for that blade to stop spinning. Now that the blade stops spinning, I can take it off and hang it back up. So, 2 hands, safety gear. What am I missing? Oh, never force the saw through the material to be cut. If it doesn't want to go smoothly, then either your blade is dull or there's a binding problem. So if it starts getting too hard to do, you need to adjust and take it out, set it down, and see what's going on. I hope this has been valuable for you, and I'll see you on the next one.